Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. This is a conversation that is a little bit of a callback to Season 1 today. Amanda and I touched on some topics around this big question today back then, and it's just, I think, a really important topic that I am looking forward to talking about with all of you and digging in a little bit more. If you're new to Big Brave Business, welcome. We've been doing small group conversations here in Season 3, so I'm really excited, but because that can be a little bit confusing, I want to kind of give you a little bit of insight into who's on the call. Who are you hearing from today? So we're going to do a little round robin of brief introductions, and then we'll get into today's big question. So I'm going to go first. My name is Sarah. I am the host of Big Brave Business, and I also run a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox.
Hey, I'm Samantha Fackler, and I am a hybrid business coach for women, but also marketing advisor, and I'm also a Reiki master. So I'm in this weird blend of business, but also energy healing to really guide female entrepreneurs.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Yuval Ackerman. I'm an ethical email marketing strategist and consultant, and I'm helping good-doing B2Bs and e-commerce find their hidden six-figure revenue in their email lists.
Hi everyone, I'm Fokpa Nkwacha. Friends call me Fopsy. I'm a business coach for service providers, and I'm also the host of two podcasts. One is called Dear Fopsy. It's about relationships and stories of resilience. And the other is called Money Making Priorities, which is all things sales and marketing tools for service providers. Super thrilled to be here today.
Yay, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Today, we're going to dig into the power of marketing psychology, or I guess the psychology of marketing and influence over people, potential buyers. So, what ethical concerns should businesses consider when using marketing psychology to influence customers?
I think I can start. Intent. I think that's one big one. Just like, what's your intention? And that foils everything, because if you are intending to deceive and manipulate, nothing good can come out of this. Like, the intent is where things start from. That also guides what you're creating. So if you're forging sales records, there's nothing good that can come out of that. Like, you just made it up. It's not real. Versus if you are just genuinely showing the results you've gotten with your own method and the sales that have resulted from it, especially if it's relevant to how you sell, that matters. And so starting with your why you're doing this, and also being aware, I guess, second point, about the power dynamics that are at play in the way our work, I guess. Interestingly, I was just reading a book about influence, and it's how people just believe people that are authority figures, white coats, someone telling them to do something, and not just jump right into it, but I guess I will. Some experiments from psychology class that I remember, because I have an undergrad in psych, where they were administering shocks to people, and the researcher was just telling people to administer shocks, and you could hear the people on the other end groaning in pain and all of that, and the shocks were increasing. But because someone was telling them to do it, even though they could hear the sound of the effects of what they were doing, they just kept going. And the hypothesis was that people wouldn't keep going because, again, you have the free will to just get up. Like, no one is forcing you. But just because someone in the place of authority was telling them to do it, they kept at it. And so remembering that when you are if there's a power dynamic at play, you have to be more cautious about what you tell people to do, and making sure that there's room to back out or to disagree and be safe, right? All of that matters. So intent, but also being aware of the power dynamics at play. I will stop there, and then let's see where the conversation goes beyond that.
I think the intent piece is an interesting one, because I think a lot of founders would actually have positive, true intentions, but where it gets messy is that all of a sudden they step into a scarcity mindset. They're not seeing results. They're like, how do I push it? How do I increase or improve my marketing? And then things start to slip ethically. then people feel pressure to use fake testimonials or fake numbers or alter their numbers so that they feel good about it and it's from a true source, but it's actually not reflective. And that's what I see a lot. That's where it gets a little chaotic.
So in my field, what I'm seeing a lot, speaking of intent, is a lot of businesses that might have great values, just have been following the wrong best practices, so to speak, confuse intent with consent and permission, which are not the same thing. From coming from the email space, right? There are still territories around the world, for who knows which reason, that still allow subscribing website visitors onto your email list without their explicit permission. Not talking about consent just yet, just permission. And so I think it's really, really important for business owners and brand owners listening to us to understand that, yes, we do need to go the extra mile to ask for explicit permission, and then also nurture that relationship with asking for consent repeatedly, because this is a relationship. And if we forget that the intent is one or the other at certain parts of the customer journey, then we might be losing our subscribers and our customers along the way. And that's an issue that a lot of brands are actually facing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. You all have really already opened up some big cans of worms here. And I think that, Samantha, that's the first thing that came to mind for me too with intent, is that I think a lot of people have good intentions, or they think they do. And Yuval, I think you nailed it. Like, your intentions get lost when you're being advised or coached. And I think it can be as simple as even thinking about, okay, pricing psychology, like, how do I price my offers? And when somebody teaches you, like, okay, well, here's some things to consider, because humans react differently to this number than they do to this number. And here's first, based on what evidence? Like, we just believe them because they're teaching us how to sell and we just really want to make more sales. But second of all, even if they are, like, here's some sources that I can cite, actual psychological studies based on science. Then even if they have that, which I've never seen anyone provide that when they're teaching about that, but regardless, even if you believe it, which, I mean, I've been like, oh yeah, anecdotally, that makes sense. That's what Walmart does. That's what Costco does. That's what I see in my own behavior. How do I feel about these numbers? So I get it, but using that just as one simple example of pricing psychology, I think these things matter to us as business owners. We're like, oh yeah, we have to pick a price based on something. And it's a lot of factors. So then when I also then take into consideration what's going to give me the best conversion rate, of course, I want a good conversion rate. I want to stay in business, right? Then at what point does that become manipulation? That's where, and that slope is kind of slippery. What is the difference between leveraging psychology and using psychology to manipulate people?
I honestly think that the major difference here is between knowing about it and doing it anyway, and not knowing about it and then just doing that, not knowing about this. So to me, that's first and foremost the most major difference. Later on, we can talk about the size of packages or services, and when charm pricing is working and not working, and the threshold there. But yeah, it's a really, really good topic as well. I was just talking about pricing specifically with a bunch of my colleagues in the email space just yesterday, and we were all talking about how this is still a taboo amongst ourselves. And so I think just even talking about pricing, even in this room, is so, so important, because it's still such a concealed topic that it's tough. It's tough to really wrap our heads around it, because what our competitors are doing and what we're doing might be similar. It's not the same, might be similar. But yeah, my head is thinking of 1,000 different topics to talk about with relation to pricing. So I'll just stop and pass the mic on.
Yeah, I'm curious what Fope has to say about the psychology piece here, but I just looked up the definition of manipulation, and it really comes from the root word of handful, and it's like shaping someone's behavior, right? It's having influence. And when I thought about it, I was like, honestly, all marketing is manipulation, but there is ethical marketing and there's not ethical. So then how does that intersect with this? And I think it's the subject matter. It's like what you're saying, because I've seen marketing that sounds like it's positive and empowering And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, they are saying that people should be taking out loans to buy this program and draining their savings, and that's okay, and that there's all this manipulative language to get people to buy this thing. But when you actually read it, you're like, no, 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 this is bad manipulation. This is not in service of the person. It's in service of the program over the person. So I don't know, maybe that's the line. It's open.
Okay. So I think that I disagree that all psychology is manipulation, because the distinction between manipulation and persuasion is that manipulation creates an unfair advantage for one person. It's in a way that you're controlling or influencing to achieve your own goal, and it's like it's a form of deception, if you will, right? Whereas persuasion is more how you grow to love someone that you didn't love at first sight, kind of. It's that you now have more information and are able to make an informed choice to walk away or to commit, but you are not being tricked. He's not wearing a wig or something, right? So it's his real hairline, right? Or even did not intentionally hide information that they knew you would need to make that decision. It's things like that. So that's why I was saying about intent, but maybe there's still, I know that in our online space, you said something earlier about everyone starts with good intentions. Most people start with good intentions, but then scarcity is a big problem, which is why I say that it's not popular in our world, but you get to do the unpopular thing to get a job, to make your needs met for a while so that you can clear your head. I agree that it's really hard to always do the ethical thing when you're in serious need. So maybe that's also another way to like guard against toying that line of manipulation to create safety for yourself financially so that your regular needs are met, not regular, like think of Maslow's hierarchy. So you can afford your house, you can afford healthcare, and then you can make clear decisions based on that. Because it's really hard to make clear decisions when your bills are due. So I think that that's one core thing. And I see people want to say things, I will pause there.
I want to really, I think you really are onto something here. And you got me excited because you've all mentioned earlier consent and permission. And I think I wanted to come back to that anyway. And then you're adding in this layer of who is it for your benefit, who, and that's the power dynamic that you were talking about before, right? So I think that this is an important piece, because when we are in scarcity, we're thinking of it as I need to make this sale, right? But what, and so that's calling out Samantha too. So we're like really bringing this together, which is why I was like, yes, you're nailing this, because I think that when both people are equally benefiting from the transaction, then it isn't manipulation. It is ethical, because what we're doing is helping someone make an informed choice, that we're both going into this informed together, and we both agree this is a collaboration we want to do. And the exchange of value is that, and this really changed the way I thought about sales when I first was going into business for myself, was listening to a coach on a podcast talking about sales as service, and talking about if you genuinely believe that the offer that you're putting out there provides a benefit to the ideal customer, not everyone, but to your ideal customer, then it is doing them a service to make it available to them. And then you price appropriately for that, right? You price at a point that what you're doing is mutually beneficial for both of you. And then the customer is actually glad to be able to they're going to make that investment somewhere. They're glad to be able to make the investment in you because they're entering into an informed, consensual relationship with you, right? Based on whatever that is, even if it's a product. I think that's still true. So yeah, let's come back to that. Yes, please come back to the consent. And
no, I just want to mention something about, I keep on thinking about how the villains are still the heroes in their own stories. And we do need to take that into account as well. So when we're saying that it's an exchange of value that is worthy for, or that is worthy for both sides, you also have to take into consideration those multi-billion, multi-million dollar deals that are being done where both parties are not the most ethical parties out there. Their pricing is not necessarily ethical. The way they market to their audience is not necessarily ethical, but in their own eyes, they're the heroes of their own story. So just putting it out there.
Yeah, I think that's what I've seen out there too, Yuval. Like, it's just so I do a lot of review on people's marketing. And a lot of times people will come to me and be like, hey, I'm thinking about signing up with this person or this thing. What do you think? And so I'm reviewing marketing a lot and helping my clients make key decisions. And we're talking about big investments like, hey, should I hire this agency? Should I hire this partner, advisor, whatever? And it's so subtle and it's really hard to find out from the outside unless you know what you're looking for. And there's these little cues that show you like, oh, there's something off here. There's something icky. And sometimes you can't quite spot it in plain sight. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up too. These little cues and signals.
What are the cues and signals?
What I see is, like I was explaining that example before, in an FAQ on a page of, hey, could you explain the pricing for this? And this person goes into the value of being in their energy rather than the value of the program. They say, hey, this is how people have paid for this program in the past. Savings accounts, taking out a loan, like, ooh, whoa, 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 no, right? That's a huge red flag. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I was thinking along similar lines of, well, first of all, I love the line about even the villains are heroes in their own stories to keep us honest about it, right? And I think one thing that maybe ties it in is like sometimes we're lazy in our own marketing, or we want to take the what feel like is already getting everybody else results. And so you promise something that you have not gotten for yourself, or do not know how to replicate for other people. And so you're promising something that is vague and hard to evaluate, like, is this for me or is this not for me? That's also a problem, because the more specific you can get in your result, the more people can decide, is that a result that I want or don't want? And then you can make both a logical and emotional, because every purchase is kind of emotional option decision. And so the time we take to clarify exactly what we're offering, to dig into our own client results, to pull those out of different kinds of people that have achieved the results in the time they achieved it, and making that clear and being real about what you can expect and putting all of that out, the better you're able to help your clients make informed decisions. So it's also us not being lazy and not just like putting your energy as the real reason. Even though sometimes some clients will say, I just love the vibe of working with you. Okay, but I know you didn't buy the vibe. So tell me exactly what made you buy, so that I can look for that in other people and I can say it to other people or things like that. So it's a bit harder to dig deeper. I want to acknowledge that, but we have to, because we recognize the value of it. And then we too have to be not humble about our results, the results you've actually had, so that people can see that and decide if they want that for themselves, as opposed to just, it'll be beautiful, it'll be great, which means nothing. And it's what can lead to regrettable purchases. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that points to another one of those red flag signals that I see all the time on Instagram, which is like, I made 7 figures in 60 days and this is how you do it. It's like, well, that may have worked for you, but there are probably a lot of variables in that result that are not captured. And I highly doubt that you can actually recreate that for every person that takes this program or thing. Otherwise, it would have an even bigger impact and you probably wouldn't even have to market it that much. So yeah, just wanted to
Speaking of that, I saw a sales page yesterday that had, can I name drop people? It's a massive person. Okay, maybe not. So they were showing Amy Porterfield as their result. And I'm like, Amy Porterfield is not the typical person. And she didn't only use your program. She has people working with her. She has multiple tools, 15 plus years of experience. That's not who you should put as 450,000 was made. Okay, but not everybody's gonna do that. So it's also realizing that you can't only put the stars of your show, which then comes to the part of, but if someone says, okay, but I actually did help Amy Porterfield, but you're not the only person helping her. So to what extent do you say, and these are all the coaches that supported me, and these are all the failures I had along the way. This was after 7 years of experience, because people are coming to you because they want things to be quick, or they want things to be simpler. You know that. So how do you balance that line of, I worked with this person, but I also know that they had all of these things going for them, and not everybody would have that. So that's, I guess, a question that we should also address as people in the industry.
Yeah. And I think those sites that highlight Amy Porterfield as a client also have hopefully the fine print, and usually they're big enough that they do, the fine print at the very bottom of the web page that's super tiny that says star results not typical. And it's like, yeah, of course. But I think that this is a great thing to look out for, because I think when you are considering making an investment in service, I think that, or product, I think that looking at who the stories are in their testimonials, who are those people and where were they before they started that program, does matter. Because unless you have a team of 16 and you're making hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million a month in revenue already, of course you're not going to get Amy Porterfield's result. Like, of course you're not. So if you're a person like trying to get started and you're like, that's who I want to be, so I want the opportunity to be in this energy and to be in this room and to be surrounded by these people, then you have to understand. And I see this with podcast clients a lot, where they'll come to me and they'll say, I want to be Jenna Kutcher, and I want my podcast to be the Jenna Kutchers. And it's like, okay, well, Jenna Kutcher's been podcasting for like more than 10 years. She's got a team. She makes hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue a month, right? So realistically, you can have a great podcast, but we need to set your expectations for how long-term are we talking in trying to achieve those goals, and what are the steps that it's going to take along the way. And realistically, what is your podcast going to look like in the next quarter? It's not going to look like that. And so I'm not saying you can't get there. I'm not trying to crush anyone's dream. I can't promise that you're going to get there, but it's going to take time. Jenna Kutcher didn't get there in a quarter. She got there over years. So, and to your point, all of your points, that there were also a lot of other factors that went into her results, right? If you want to think of it in terms of a long game, fine, we can work toward those goals. You can set big goals for yourself. Just know in the next year that we work together, we're going to try to achieve a fraction of that. Let's dial it back.
I think it's also it goes back to what I think Samantha said, was like, intent is all of us start with good intention. Show my best customers first might be what that person is thinking. Greatest results first. Okay, but is that persuasion or is that manipulation?
I think it's a fine line. And I think that what I am learning from this conversation is that I don't know how to recognize the difference. Because I think I was thinking about this with even the first red flags that you gave, Sam, when you said in the FAQs, if it's like, oh, take out a loan to pay for this or something like that, and you're like, oh, that's a red flag. I feel the same. I feel like if that's your recommendation, then you're selling to the wrong people. And at the same time, I used to have, so I like an interest form when somebody sets like essentially a sales call with my team. We don't just do standard sales calls. We do a strategy session for anyone who wants to start a podcast. And then of course, at the end of the strategy session, and strategy, no matter what, it's 100% free. But at the end of the strategy session, if it's a good fit, we share the different ways that you could potentially work with Podfox. So it is a sales call, but that's not the point of the call. The point is a strategy session. And I have an interest form to have people fill out so that we have an understanding of who we're meeting with and what they want to accomplish, so that the strategy session can be tailored to their vision, right? And one of the questions used to be, if you have a business, if you run a business, right? If you're an entrepreneur, that's one of the other choices, then what is your average monthly revenue? And what's interesting is I was trying to get an idea, because I don't want to sell to somebody who would have no, I don't want to say no business. That's not my choice to make, which is what I'm going to come around to. But somebody who isn't making revenue does not need to invest in my service right now. And I want to be able to be honest with somebody that like, hey, make revenue first. When you're making revenue, then let's talk. Like, and a podcast is not the quickest way to start making revenue. So if you think that this is what you need to do when you're first starting your business, then I'm going to tell you, in my personal opinion, and I'm not a business coach, there's other things that would be a quicker way to start generating revenue in your business. And when you're doing that, I would love to potentially work together then. So I ended up changing the question on that form, which the current version is, what is your current prepared budget? What budget have you already prepared to spend on podcast support? And then you could say the answer is none, right? And it's still your choice whether you end up changing your mind about that. But that is a totally different question, because actually how much money you make, like, none of my freaking business. And what you want to do to pay for a service is completely up to you. Your money is your own. That is your thing. That's not for me to decide for you. So for anybody listening who has taken out a loan or considered taking out a loan or opening a credit card or putting an investment on a credit card or selling a car to go to Tony Robbins, which is like a famous kind of stereotype, right? Like I sold my car to go to Tony Robbins, which I've heard that from so many people at this point, that fable. I actually kind of wonder, has anybody actually done that? Or is this just a thing we say about going to Tony Robbins? But regardless, and I don't know, that might be a very American centric. I don't know if you guys are in the Tony Robbins influence sphere, but anyways, regardless, if somebody makes that decision in order to afford an investment, are they, I mean, is that their choice or is that manipulation?
This is interesting because so for my private clients on their application form, I do ask what was their revenue last year, and then what are they looking for the next year? Because that shows me a lot of different things. What are they trying to get to? How hungry are they? What are they willing to commit to get to that next level? And what even is a next level for them? So I can better understand their goals. But I had a mastermind in the past where on the application, I asked that too. And it was a higher level mastermind. And I was open about the fact that because this is a group, I want to make sure people are around the same level in revenue, because that shows me they're around the same chapter in business, right? All of them have some contractors. They're not just starting out, they're in this mid stage. So I think it's like, how is that question being used? I'm not learning how much they make so that I can change my price to make sure that to try and get the most out of them, right? I'm asking for their goals. So I think there's this subtle nuance of like, how is the question being used? Because I did have to turn away some people that applied to that mastermind because they didn't hit a certain number. They weren't in the right stage. And it was more about the stage than the number. But yeah, I think it's like the how where it comes in.
I think similarly, or a similar conversation is also your pricing, and how do you let them know what it is before they come to the call so that they can decide if they want to be there or not. So if you've seen the price and you're still on the call, I have to assume that you've done the math and you decide you want to come for some reason. And so at that point, I think that's where it becomes perhaps ethical, and you can debate me on this one, to dig deeper if there are pricing objections, because you saw the price before you booked the call and you still came. If I really want a Mercedes, I don't have Mercedes maintenance money, so I don't have one, but I love to go and look at it. And when they tell me, are you buying or looking? I just tell them flat out, I'm just looking, because I know that I'm not there to buy. And so it's also that I want to be there to remind myself that I want to be there. I'm also honest to them that I'm not trying to buy. But if I came with the intent to buy and I knew the price and I'm there, then if I'm still bringing the pricing objection, then it's probably not about price, it's about something else. And I think that's where we get to talk about getting deeper with them. And I'm bringing up a sub question of, is coaching around pricing objection something that toys the line as well? Because that's where we start to think about, there are people who've made investments while in debt and have not had regrettable investment. They actually were grateful that that was something they did, and I was one of them. And there are people who just could not see how this was the path forward, and that's fine as well. So I think the question was, do we get to decide if people should make that, where should they bring the money from? We also need to respect that they have their own autonomy. They get to make decisions. So it's our job to present information. And also, I like to think, do I want to be treated like this? Which I don't know. It's not a good enough judge, because not everybody has the same standards for themselves. All I'm saying is that this is a very thin line that we're talking about right now. If it was clearer, it would be easier.
Obviously, because we all just unmuted, like, we all want to jump in.
I just wanted to mention that I think it's our responsibility as business owners to also tell clients that they're not ready for us, and have this integrity of saying the choice is yours. If we believe in free choice and blah, 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 the choice is yours to make an investment or not. I'm telling you that from what I've seen with my previous clients, you will be more successful if you get to this level first, or if you put a few of your marketing eggs in a few different baskets. There's nothing that I like more than hopping on discovery calls with people that I thought I qualified. This is a different topic. And telling them 10 minutes into the call, look, I don't think we're a good fit. I can recommend you to other people. I'm learning a lot from these conversations as well. But I think we have to take responsibility on how much we want to sell versus how much we want to help and how realistic that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just touching on one piece with the loan piece, because I think that's interesting. It came up, but it speaks to autonomy, right? Some businesses have to purchase things on loans. My dad has a manufacturing business. He had to buy up a lot of equipment when they were opening the warehouse. And of course, all of that was on a loan. He did not have enough money for that. And in fact, he shipped all of that to our personal home. Before he got the warehouse, he tried to time it right. And luckily it all worked. So we didn't have this huge machinery at our residential property. But I digress. It's not our place to say, hey, you can't do this or can, but we do have to keep in mind, like, how much value are they going to get out of this program, and then advise them. And we can say no. I guess we can say no. We can say you're not a good fit, but how can we do that gently and respectfully as well?
Yeah, I think so. I'm hung up on the word consent, and I know I'm coming across that way, but I think this has been in my head since I had a guest, Stephanie, talking about trauma-informed marketing a year ago on the podcast. And there are 7 principles to trauma-informed marketing. Anyways, it's in that podcast episode, but one of them was consent, and this like blew my mind, thinking about sales in terms of, well, from a trauma-informed lens, but also specifically thinking about consent. And to use an example of consent that anybody could understand, even if the rest of this is kind of new for you to consider, the ethical implications of, well, if they still showed up, then that's my green light, could be taken to a dating perspective where someone could say, well, they still showed up to the date. They obviously knew I wanted to sleep with them, or they still came into my house. They knew I wanted to sleep with them. They came into my bed. They knew I wanted to sleep with them. So at any point, I can then use that as justification for whatever happened next, which of course we all know is not true. At any point, your consent can change. You get to change your mind that this is no longer a consensual relationship. But I think that there's kind of 2 sides of ethical coaching here. One side is, and this comes back to being really aware of those power dynamics that you talked about at the very beginning, Fopsy, which is like being really aware of what our power dynamic is in influencing our prospective buyers, and then also making sure it's consensual on both sides at all stages, like seeking permission and consent at all stages of the sales process. I saw somebody talking about this from a very, very simplistic marketing perspective, and this did not even occur to me, which is somebody had posted a thread saying they can't, sorry if it's any of you on the call, that would be funny, I can't stand when I get added to someone's close friends list on Instagram without my consent. And I was like, why would you? That's so strange to me to need to opt in, because marking people as your close friend affects how they come up in your feed. It kind of means you want them to see your stuff and you want to see theirs. That feels a positive thing. And this person said, because it elevates them in my feed and I didn't ask for that, which I don't know if that's really how the algorithm works, but regardless, I thought that it was an interesting thing. I was like, you chose to follow them. So, but now you're like, I don't want to see your content. That seems weird. Why'd you follow them then? I did have that reaction, but I do think it's kind of an interesting point, right? Which is that someone's consent can change at any point in your relationship, right? Just because you consented at some point doesn't mean you have consent forever. And continuing to check in with each other and continuing to make sure, hey, are we still on the same page? Hey, are we still, what concerns come up for you? What works for you about this? What doesn't work for you about this? What could be better? Even from a follow-up perspective, and this I think had been like kind of revolutionary for me, is especially on a sales call, is getting the consent on the sales call of like, okay, so this is what I would like to send you. Is it okay if I send this to you after this call? This is what I'm going to send. Great. Then I would like to follow up with you by X date. If I haven't heard from you first, I would like to reach out again. Would that be appropriate? And what's the best way for me to do that? Would you like me to just send you an email? Would you like me to follow up where we first met on social media? If I have your phone number, is it okay if I send you a text? Just get that consent and set that expectation up front. And then when you text them 3 days later, they're not like, I never gave consent for this person to text me. No, we literally had this conversation, right? So that way I know I got verbal consent, which is also, by the way, what you should do when you're dating. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up the topic of relationships, right? Because that's ultimately what we're doing here. That's what marketing is. Marketing is a relationship between the business and the end user, the person. And in all relationships, you want to be clear. You want to have that communication channel. And I know with my clients, it's like the very first, I always set expectations throughout every single step. Sales call, or if we just have a coaching call one time, I set expectations. If I do invite them to be a private client, it feels like an invitation. It doesn't feel like a pitch because that feels really good to me. And then even when we start coaching together, I start off the call with, hey, here's some ground rules. Here's what to expect. There's always a direct line of communication. You can always let me know if you want to adjust things. And then even if I'm working with someone for like an entire year, every other week, I will still check in. And that's the same with my husband. We have check-ins where we're like, hey, what's going well? What could be improved? Is there anything that you want to bring up that hasn't had room to breathe? And yeah, it's just so important.
But that's exactly it. It's a relationship. And so in a relationship, there are two hopefully equal parties participating, which is why I totally get it wasn't me, but I totally get whoever wrote this thread, because being added to a marketer's close friend is a close friends on Instagram or whatever is a tactic with, I would say, not the most honest intent. And I haven't been on Instagram forever, so I don't know if it's possible for a person that's been added to opt out unless they text that person and ask them, and then who knows if that will ever happen. So if we are talking about relationships and having two parties participating, then I totally get why that threader was upset, because there wasn't a check-in, there wasn't consent, and there was no way, hopefully there is, but it sounds like there is no way to opt out of it.
So I guess what I was going to say is a little bit different, or at least maybe aligned with you removing yourself, is exercising the power you do have to mute people, to unfollow them, to block them, to create an email where all your marketing goes to so that you're not perpetually being marketed to if you know you're susceptible to it. So you also have the right as a consumer to exercise the power you do have. And so let's not also, businesses have to sell. They have to sell because that's how they make money. And so if you are in a store and the salesperson is going too hard, you get to say, thank you, no thanks, and walk out. If you are in a container that is no longer comfortable, especially because you're not there all the time, at least when the call is done, you get a moment to be like, did I like how I was just being treated? No, let's do something about it. Let me write an email, let me talk to a partner about it and see if they think this was actually weird, and things like that. So exercise the right you have, because people similarly complain about too many posts, too many emails. Block them, unsubscribe, do something about it. Don't always, because like you as a business owner have to sell. Like you have to sell. If not, you're not gonna be here for a long time. That matters. And I don't also want us to go to whatever left or right to the extent where we start to be afraid of selling because of your borderline thinking it might be too hard on. So there's also the balance of you're not being aggressive, but you have to be persistent in and to show up enough to be remembered, because people have lives and they're busy. And so if you only show up once in a while and your energy is so passive, maybe it feels like you don't really believe in what you're selling or something like that. So it's a balance. And we as consumers should also exercise the power we have. One small thing I do is after every coaching call, I ask for feedback. What has been the most helpful about this conversation? And it's a time for them to reflect, but also a time for me to realize what was useful, what was not, and do more of that. When the container is done, when we're done, we have an entire call just on debriefing essentially. And that helps me learn about what has worked, what hasn't worked. And oftentimes also, I mean, nice massage to my ego and maybe a testimonial video, whatever, but yes, but it also helps to know just what things were not good or good about this. And it's good that that opportunity exists. And something Sam said that I want to highlight as well is part of creating safety is sharing in advance what's going to happen, because on the sales call, this is what's going to happen. And so that they know what to expect. At the end of it, I'm going to tell you the price again and ask you any questions about it and also help you make a decision. My process is for you to be able to decide within the next 48 hours, because it's just how long I hold your spot for. And you tell them, they get to decide what they want to do with that. But it's your prerogative to make things clear, because our brains also work better when things are clear and you're not left to deciding by yourself. So that leadership is very important if you want to help people feel safe to make a decision, but also to not stress yourself out wondering if the sale is going to come or not going to come. So it's a fine balance of things. So I know that there's a way to be so extreme that you are forcing people and pushing, but there's also the other side where you're just not doing enough to close the deal. So yeah, it's a fine line. Yeah.
I think this is such a good point about exercising our rights to say no and to unsubscribe and block. I'm all for it. And I'm usually advocating for my clients' clients saying, hey, if people unsubscribe, that's good for everyone, right? But I also want us to think of the fact that when put on the spot, some people are just saying yes because they're uncomfortable. And just to share a really, really extreme story, in that room, I was working with a coach a few years back, and it was on a feedback call that she wanted to record. But not only did she want to record this, when I hopped on a call with her, and there were a few other red flags when we were working together, but when I hopped on the call, it was Friday evening, my time, and she said, oh, can you turn on your camera? And I said, oh, I'm in my PJs already. I just thought it would be something like a phone call. And she said, oh, I wanted to stream this call to my Facebook group. And I panicked. I panicked because I didn't know about this. I didn't consent to this, obviously. And had she asked me for consent beforehand, I would probably say no, because that's none of anyone's concern what I'm going to say in the feedback session. And yeah, but if it was on the spot, I might have said yes, because I would have felt uncomfortable, because back then my boundaries were not as strong as they are now. And so we need to also think about that when we ask for consent and we hold the power navigating conversations, especially tough conversations about money, which is not necessarily the easiest conversation or topic for everyone, we need to take that into account as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And that sounds stressed. I felt stressed just thinking about being in that situation. So I feel you. And I think it is interesting. Even just doing a podcast like this is primarily only audio. We do record the video. We use the video for promoting the podcast, right? And for having social media content to put out there. I love the idea of having more significant clips to use from the video. I don't think an hour-long talking head video generally performs well, so I don't know about the full length, although there's mixed feelings about that. But I've had people who have shown up to record the podcast, even though I try to put it on the calendar invite and in the reminders and whatnot. This is video and audio. I've had people who show up, and you can tell by the way they show up, like in pajamas, etc., that they aren't necessarily, and I mean, no judgment. Listen, I pretty much show up to Zoom exactly as I am, and I'm like, let's do it. But I also respect other people may not feel the same. And so when someone shows up and they say, are we recording video? I always say, typically I record audio and video, but I absolutely respect whatever you're comfortable with. Primarily, we just need the audio. So if you don't want to use video, it's no problem. And if they opt out in that moment, then I'm not going to use the video, right? Like that would be really lazy. Like, well, you didn't turn your camera off, so now this is my property. I think people do that. And again, not because they necessarily set out with negative intentions, but I think technically, yes, that property is mine or whatever, but that again gets so icky and so quickly. So I think just kind of being aware of it is half the battle. And for so many people who are just getting started in business, or especially dipping their toe in the waters of business coaching, there's so much bad advice out there. And there are so many people who are promoting these things. Like there are services to create a fabricated Stripe dashboard screenshot. And that service only exists because there's a need, quote unquote, in the market, right? So somebody made that option available to make it easy for you to get. I only know about that from Threads, by the way. I've never shared a Stripe screenshot with anyone other than my partner to say, check this shit out. I feel great. But I've never shared it to social media, let alone a fake one. But regardless, I think as you dip your toe in these waters, it can feel so confusing. And listening to your intuition and what you know to be true, and listening to what, like, what your own ethics and values are when you know there are people who are having more success, quote unquote, than you, who are further along than you, that you have the opportunity to learn from. That is hard. So I say all this to kind of put a bow on this conversation to say nobody's doing this perfectly. And you've hopefully heard all of us grappling with our own ethics and our own processes. And well, wait, I do that. Well, wait, I've been there. Well, wait, I've asked that question. I've added people to my close friends list. I've done whatever. I think we've all kind of had one of those moments on this podcast where we're like, I mean, I'm thinking about this now. So if you are listening to this and you're feeling like, I don't know how to do this perfectly, nobody knows how to do this perfectly. I think the biggest question is that you care and that you are constantly learning and trying to improve and do better at being as ethical as you can in the way you do business and the way that you create community and serve people. And if we're always trying, then that's the best we can really hope for. So I want to take a minute to thank each of you for showing up and digging right into a pretty morally gray area and being so transparent and honest and vulnerable in your shares. Thank you so much. It is not easy to be big and brave. And I just appreciate you so much. The podcast wouldn't exist if you and like you did not show up to have these conversations week over week. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. And that goes to both the three of you on the call as well as to you listening. It really means a lot. And to you listening, we will see you right here next week.